Avoidantly attached individuals thrive on control, not over others, but over emotional distance. It's how they survive connection. They measure intimacy in safe doses, offering just enough warmth to keep you close, but not enough vulnerability to feel exposed. In their world, power lies in withdrawal, pulling away before anyone can hurt them, retreating before love becomes dependence. But everything changes the moment you stop reacting. When your silence isn't desperate, when your calm isn't a tactic but a truth, the avoidant feels something they haven't felt in a long time: powerless. At first, they'll tell themselves they don't care. They'll act unbothered, detached, like you were never that important. But underneath that practiced indifference is confusion, because something about your detachment doesn't feel like rejection, it feels like freedom. And freedom terrifies the avoidant. They've built their entire identity on being emotionally self-sufficient, untouched, unreachable. But when you mirror that same independence, suddenly their emotional game loses its meaning. There's no reaction to control, no need to manage, no one to push or pull. Just silence. Real silence. The kind that reflects their own avoidance back at them. And that's when it hits. The realization that they no longer control the emotional rhythm. You do. Not because you're manipulating, but because you've detached from needing their validation. You've stopped interpreting their distance as a personal wound. You've stopped chasing after the version of them that never existed. That calm self-respect, that's what disarms them. It's what makes you unforgettable. For the avoidant, this isn't just about losing control of you. It's about losing control of the story they tell themselves, that they don't need anyone, that they're always one step ahead, that love is something they can ration and survive untouched. But when you step away in peace instead of protest, you rewrite that narrative entirely. Because the moment they realize they can't control you anymore is the moment they finally have to face what they've been running from all along: themselves. If you want to better understand how to deal with avoidance, then subscribe to the channel to know everything. It starts subtly. The avoidant begins to feel the ground shift beneath them, not because you did anything loud, but because you stopped doing anything at all. No more chasing. No more decoding silences. No more trying to prove your worth through patience or understanding. You've reclaimed the space they used to dominate with unpredictability. And in that quiet, something happens that every avoidant dreads. They lose emotional control. Avoidants depend on predictable reactions. When they withdraw, they expect pursuit. When they get cold, they expect warmth in return. These dynamics reaffirm their internal logic. Closeness equals pressure, distance equals safety. But when you no longer participate in that cycle, their system malfunctions. They can't read you anymore. They can't feel the familiar reassurance of being needed. What once kept them safe now makes them uneasy. This is when confusion sets in. They'll replay moments in their head, searching for signs they missed. When did the power shift? When did you stop caring? It's not about love for them yet. It's about the loss of control. You were the mirror that confirmed their worth without threatening their autonomy. But now, the mirror is gone. And without it, they begin to see themselves in ways they've long avoided. The irony is painful. They wanted independence, but now that they have it, yours, not theirs, it feels like abandonment. They mistake your self-respect for rejection, your peace for punishment. Deep down, the avoidant never wanted you gone. They just wanted to feel safe while keeping you close. But your absence exposes the truth. Safety and control are not the same thing. And that realization destabilizes them more than any confrontation ever could. So they hover. They test the waters with casual messages or subtle check-ins. They want to know if they still matter, if they can still pull you back into the emotional rhythm they once dictated. But you don't respond the same way anymore. The dance has ended, and they're still standing on the floor, waiting for music that won't play. And in that silence, their avoidance starts to sound like anxiety. For the first time, they feel the discomfort they've spent their whole lives trying to escape, the ache of not being in control. For the avoidant, Control isn't cruelty. It's safety. It's the invisible armor they've worn since childhood, protection against disappointment, rejection, or emotional engulfment. They learned early that closeness can turn into chaos, that love can become obligation, that vulnerability can cost you your peace. So, they built distance into their identity. But when they lose control over you, that armor starts to crack. At first, they deny it. They tell themselves you're just another person who couldn't handle their independence. They minimize the connection, reframe it as a mismatch, a misunderstanding. But beneath that intellectualizing is a storm they can't manage. Because this time, detachment didn't make them feel powerful, it made them feel empty. You didn't plead, you didn't demand, and your calm detachment wasn't punishment. It was clarity. That's what makes it so disarming. When an avoidant realizes they can no longer dictate emotional tempo, something paradoxical happens. Their fear of engulfment morphs into fear of loss. They begin to feel what they've always made others feel: uncertainty, longing, confusion. They wonder if they misjudged you, if they pushed too hard, if maybe, for once, they went too far. The control that once felt like freedom now feels like isolation. And here's the turning point. What they're losing isn't just you. It's their emotional certainty, their coping mechanism, their illusion that emotional withdrawal equals strength. Your peace threatens that illusion. It tells them there's another way to exist in connection, one where boundaries don't mean disconnection, where love doesn't require surrender, where safety doesn't come from control. That truth terrifies them, because to accept it, they'd have to face what they've avoided their entire life: their dependency. Not the needy kind, but the human kind. The part that wants to be loved and still be free. You represented that balance, and now that you've stepped away, they feel the absence of it like oxygen leaving the room. They start to realize that maybe control was never the power they thought it was. Maybe it was the very thing keeping them from the connection they claimed not to need. And that thought, quiet, inconvenient, but real, starts to echo louder than the silence you left behind. Avoidants spend their lives mastering one art: emotional control. Every gesture, every withdrawal, every silence serves a purpose: to manage how close someone can get. They're not trying to be cruel. They're trying to stay safe. But when they lose control over you, that control mechanism no longer protects them. It exposes them. Because now, every move they once used to create distance only reflects their own fear back at them. You see, when you no longer react to their distance, you become the mirror they've been avoiding. Their silence doesn't make you chase. Their withdrawal doesn't create chaos. Instead, it reveals the truth. The only one still playing the game is them. And in that realization, avoidance becomes self-confrontation. They start to see the emotional patterns they've spent their lives rationalizing. The detachment, the coldness, the calculated distance. All of it begins to look less like strength and more like fear. It's disorienting, because for once, they can't project their discomfort onto someone else. There's no anxious partner begging for reassurance, no emotional storm to justify their retreat. Just your quiet steadiness. Proof that peace doesn't mean disconnection, that love doesn't have to mean control. And this is where avoidance turns inward. They begin to question themselves in ways they never have before. Why did I push them away? Why do I feel so empty now? Why can't I stop thinking about someone I tried so hard to forget? Those questions don't come from love alone. They come from dissonance, the painful realization that their emotional safety net has started to unravel. But here's what's crucial. This discomfort is growth trying to happen. The loss of control isn't punishment, it's revelation. For the first time, the avoidant begins to see the cost of their emotional survival strategy. All those years of managing closeness have left them with control, but no connection. Independence, but no intimacy. When they lost control of you, they didn't just lose a relationship. They lost the illusion that distance keeps them safe. Because your calm detachment proved something powerful. that love can exist without control, that peace is stronger than manipulation, and that sometimes the person who stops chasing is the one who finally teaches the avoidant what real emotional strength looks like. Avoidants have one instinct when things feel uncertain: pull away. It's their refuge, their oxygen mask, the one move that's always kept them in control. Distance, to them, means safety, no expectations, no pressure, no emotional chaos. But when they try that same move on someone who's already detached, it doesn't have the same effect. It falls flat. They withdraw expecting you to react, to reach out, to ask what's wrong, to fill the silence with reassurance. That's how the cycle has always gone. But this time, the silence stretches, not as punishment, but as peace. You're not waiting for them to return. You're not counting the days since they last reached out. You've stepped back into your own life, into your own emotional center. And that shift, that quiet independence, becomes deafening for the avoidant. What was once a strategy for control now becomes a trigger for reflection. They start to notice that their absence doesn't create longing anymore. It creates distance, real distance. Not the kind they control, but the kind that closes doors. They can feel it. That intangible space between you no longer feels like protection. It feels like loss. At first, they try to rationalize it. They've moved on, they tell themselves. Good, that's what I wanted. But their mind doesn't believe their mouth. Because the truth is, they didn't want freedom. They wanted reassurance without risk. They wanted to hold your care without ever being held accountable for returning it. But your emotional withdrawal gave them what they said they wanted, and they hate it. In this stage, many avoidants experience emotional dissonance. They start checking your social media, wondering if you still think about them. They replay old conversations in their mind, reading meaning into moments they once dismissed. They might even reappear casually, a message, a reaction, a comment, testing if you're still emotionally available. But when your energy doesn't rise to meet theirs, they feel the full weight of their own detachment. They realize they can't reach you the same way anymore. The control that once came from unpredictability now feels powerless. Because what they didn't expect, what truly destabilizes them, is that you've learned to be calm in their absence. And that calm is everything they've been running from. Because it doesn't just mean you're done needing their validation. It means they've lost their emotional leverage. And once an avoidant loses that, they're no longer the one walking away. Avoidants never expect to miss you. They expect relief. That's the strange truth. When they pull away, they anticipate calm. Space, silence, the familiar safety of emotional solitude. For a while, they even convince themselves it worked. They tell themselves they made the right choice, that distance feels better, lighter, easier. But then something happens. The silence that once soothed them begins to sting. At first, it's subtle. A song reminds them of you. A quiet evening doesn't feel as peaceful as it used to. They catch themselves scrolling through messages, rereading moments they once dismissed. The absence they created now feels heavier than your presence ever did. It's not loneliness exactly, it's awareness. Awareness of what they pushed away and of how much that connection meant in ways they couldn't admit when they still had it. Avoidants are haunted not by what they lose, but by what they finally understand too late. When you stop responding to their withdrawal, you expose the truth of their defense mechanisms, that every escape comes with a cost. That control without connection isn't freedom, it's isolation dressed as independence. They start to wonder how you're doing, if you've moved on, if you think of them with anger or indifference. That thought, your indifference, is what truly unravels them. Because they can handle being disliked, even being blocked. But being forgotten? That's. The avoidant's entire emotional framework depends on one thing: control through distance. It's how they manage their fear of vulnerability, their fear of being needed, their fear of being known too deeply. But when you no longer orbit around that control, the dynamic collapses. Suddenly, the roles reverse. The one who feared intimacy begins to crave it. and the one who once craved closeness now values peace. This is the moment the avoidant realizes they're no longer the emotional center. They can feel it in small, painful ways. In your brief replies, your calm tone, your absence of reaction. They sense the emotional door quietly closing, not with anger, but with finality. And that subtle shift shatters their illusion of control. Because control always relied on your response. Without it, their emotional identity, the one built on avoidance, begins to crumble. They start to feel something they can't name, a hollow ache that no distraction fixes. They replay every conversation, every silence, every moment you stayed patient when they withdrew. They see it now, how you tried to meet them halfway, how you gave softness to someone who met you with walls. And the painful irony is that only now, after you've stopped trying, do they finally see the love that was there all along. For someone avoidant, this is an emotional crisis. Because the loss isn't just you. It's what you represented: safety without control, acceptance without conditions, connection without chaos. You showed them a version of love that didn't demand surrender, just presence. And that kind of love doesn't disappear quietly. It lingers, replaying itself in their mind like an unanswered question. They might try to reach out again, subtly, carefully, testing the air between you. Maybe with a casual, "Hey, how have you been?" Or a nostalgic comment meant to reopen the door without admitting guilt. But when you respond with kindness instead of attachment, something inside them breaks further. Because they realize the game is over. The power dynamic they used to depend on has dissolved completely. They're left facing the truth they never wanted to confront. Control was never love, and distance was never peace. What they thought protected them only kept them from the one thing they always claimed not to need: genuine connection. When the avoidant finally loses control, something profound happens. Their own behavior begins to reflect back at them. All the silences they once weaponized, all the distance they once created, all the moments they withheld affection to feel safe, now come back through your calm indifference. And this time, they're on the receiving end of it. The mirror they've avoided their entire life is no longer external. It's you. You don't scold them. You don't chase them. You don't demand closure. You just exist, steady, centered, at peace. And that simplicity burns deeper than any confrontation ever could. Avoidants aren't used to peace that doesn't include them. They're used to being needed, even by those they keep at arm's length. But your lack of dependence exposes a truth they've long denied. They didn't just crave control, they craved significance. They wanted to matter, but only on their terms. Now, your silence shows them what true detachment looks like. It's not withdrawal out of fear, it's presence within yourself. It's emotional independence, the very thing they thought they had, but never truly did. Because real independence doesn't mean avoiding love, it means not losing yourself in it. That's what they see in you, and it rattles them. They start to realize how much of their identity was built around resistance. They weren't just avoiding others, they were avoiding themselves, their tenderness, their longing, their unmet need to be understood. Your distance becomes their mirror, showing them the loneliness they've disguised as self-sufficiency. And it's uncomfortable, because for the first time, they can't hide from the truth that maybe, just maybe, they were never in control at all. It's not that they want power back, they want to escape the reflection. But they can't. Because every quiet moment, every unreturned message, every trace of you that remains without effort becomes a lesson. They see what peace looks like, not the numb peace of avoidance, but the grounded kind that comes from emotional maturity. And while they may never admit it out loud, a part of them begins to ache for that kind of stillness, the kind you now live in. They don't know how to get there yet, but they know they want to. That's when obsession quietly transforms into introspection. And for the first time, the avoidant stops running, not toward you, but toward understanding themselves. Something begins to shift inside the avoidant once the noise fades. Once your absence stops being something they can control and starts being something they have to feel. The silence they once used as a shield now surrounds them. And for the first time, it doesn't feel peaceful. It feels hollow. Because this time, it's not protecting them from anyone else. It's protecting them from themselves. Avoidants live in emotional contradictions. They crave connection, but fear dependence. They want to be seen, but dread exposure. Losing control of you forces both desires to collide, and that collision awakens something deeper than regret, awareness. They begin to see how much effort they've put into avoiding the very thing they've always wanted, closeness without fear. You become the turning point in their emotional story, not because you were perfect, but because you didn't abandon yourself trying to reach them. You showed them what secure attachment actually looks like in real time. You didn't chase, but you didn't hate. You didn't beg for their return, but you didn't need to prove your worth either. That balance, that grounded self-respect, becomes a quiet revelation. This is when the avoidant begins to question the cost of their safety. They start to see that their walls didn't just keep pain out, they kept love out too. They start remembering small things. Your patience during their silence, your gentleness when they withdrew, your calm when they expected chaos. Those memories sting not because they miss being in control, but because they finally understand what they lost when they mistook calmness for disinterest. And here's the quiet irony. Losing control of you becomes their first real experience of emotional surrender. Not the kind that demands closeness, but the kind that requires humility. The kind that whispers, "Maybe I was wrong." This awakening doesn't come with grand gestures or apologies. It shows up in quieter ways, in how they pause before withdrawing next time, how they hesitate before ignoring someone's message, how they start to wonder what safety might feel like if they stopped running. Your distance doesn't just change how they see you, it changes how they see themselves. Because in losing you, they discover the one truth they've never been able to face. That control is the enemy of connection. And what they were really afraid of all along wasn't you, or love, or vulnerability. It was their own reflection staring back, asking for honesty. There comes a quiet moment, one that isn't dramatic or cinematic, when the avoidant finally stops fighting the truth. Not because they've conquered their fears, but because they've grown tired of the emptiness that control brings. That's when it sinks in. The power they once prized was never power at all. It was distance. It was fear dressed up as independence. And the moment they couldn't control you anymore was the moment their false sense of strength began to dissolve. Now, in that stillness, something raw begins to rise, humility. Not the shame-filled kind, but the kind that comes from seeing clearly. They start to understand that love was never supposed to be a negotiation of distance. It was meant to be a space where both people could breathe freely, where closeness didn't mean suffocation and solitude didn't mean withdrawal. Your calm detachment, once seen as a threat, becomes their teacher. You didn't win by walking away. You simply stopped participating in the emotional loop that kept both of you small. And by doing that, you gave them the one thing avoidance never gives anyone, a mirror and a choice. A chance to see the cost of their protection and the possibility of healing beyond it. This is the real aftermath, not a grand reconciliation, not a dramatic confession, but a subtle transformation. They may not come back, or they might, not for control this time, but for truth. But whether they return or stay gone, something fundamental has changed. They can't unsee the lesson. They can't unknow what peace looks like. Because the person who used to control the tempo now moves differently. They hesitate before retreating. They pause before deflecting. They feel the weight of what silence means, and they start to crave authenticity more than safety. That's what your peace did. It woke something sleeping inside them. And maybe, in another time, another place, they'll thank you, not for staying, but for leaving with grace. Because in losing control of you, they finally began to find control within themselves. So when you think of that avoidant who couldn't handle your calm, remember this. You were never too much for them. You were just too real for the mask they were hiding behind. And now, even in your absence, they carry the echo of what real love looks like. Not control, but freedom shared between two people who no longer need to run. If this story spoke to you, share it, comment below, and subscribe, because healing from avoidance isn't about changing someone else. It's about finally choosing peace over pursuit.